In the quiet corridors of Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal secrets whisper through ancient stones, a single moment would forever alter the relationship between a king and his daughter-in-law. It wasn't the crown jewels or a grand ceremony that would mark this transformation, but a simple, heartfelt gesture that revealed the true depth of royal bonds. As Catherine, Princess of Wales, approached her 44th birthday, she had no idea that King Charles III had been quietly planning something extraordinary, a gift so personal, so steeped in royal history, that it would move her to tears and reshape how the world saw their relationship. This is the true story of how one treasured heirloom became the bridge between past and future, between duty and love, in the most powerful family on earth. The morning sun cast long shadows across the private gardens of Clarence House as King Charles III stood before the ornate mahogany cabinet that had belonged to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother. His weathered hands, marked by decades of royal duty, trembled slightly as he reached for a small velvet box hidden behind volumes of poetry that had once brought him comfort during his darkest days. Inside the box lay a delicate sapphire brooch, its deep blue stones catching the light like captured starlight. The piece had been crafted in 1923, a wedding gift from King George V to his daughter-in-law, later to become the beloved Queen Mother. For nearly a century, it had remained within the royal collection, worn only on the most significant occasions, witness to moments of joy and sorrow that had shaped the modern British monarchy. Charles closed his eyes, remembering the last time he had seen his grandmother wear this very brooch. It was during his wedding to Diana in 1981, a day that had begun with such promise yet had ultimately led to years of heartache for everyone involved. The Queen Mother had pinned it to her powder blue ensemble, her eyes twinkling with hope for the future. She had whispered to him that morning, words that had echoed in his mind for over 4 decades, that true love was not about grand gestures but about quiet understanding, about seeing someone's heart even when they tried to hide it. The king had been thinking about those words more frequently in recent months, particularly as he watched Catherine navigate her role with such grace and determination. She had entered their family as a commoner, yet she possessed something that could not be taught or inherited, an authentic warmth that seemed to heal the wounds left by past tragedies. Where others might have been intimidated by the weight of royal protocol, Catherine had found ways to honor tradition while breathing new life into it. Charles remembered the first time he had truly seen Catherine, not as his son's girlfriend, but as someone who understood the delicate balance required to serve the crown while remaining true to oneself. It was during a private family gathering at Sandringham, just months after she and William had become engaged. The family had been discussing a particularly sensitive matter regarding royal patronages, and the conversation had grown tense. While others offered opinions or remained diplomatically silent, Catherine had listened intently, then offered a perspective that was both respectful and refreshingly honest. She had spoken about the responsibility of privilege, about how those in their position had the power to either perpetuate old ways of thinking or to gently guide society towards something better. Her words were not revolutionary, but they carried a sincerity that reminded Charles of his own mother during her younger years, when she had privately shared her hopes for modernizing the monarchy while preserving its essential dignity. From that moment, Charles had begun to see Catherine differently. She was not merely his son's wife, but a true partner in the mission they all shared. Over the years, he had watched her handle triumphs and controversies with equal measure of humility and strength. When faced with intense media scrutiny, she never complained publicly. When given opportunities to shine, she always found ways to redirect attention to the causes she championed. The king particularly admired how Catherine had handled the recent challenges facing the royal family. Public opinion polls showed fluctuating support for the monarchy, yet Catherine's approval ratings remained consistently high. More importantly, she had found ways to connect with people from all walks of life without compromising the dignity of her position. She visited hospitals and spoke with patients as though they were old friends. She worked with children and somehow managed to be both authoritative and approachable. She attended state functions and represented the crown with elegance that honored both protocol and personal authenticity. As Charles held the brooch, he reflected on the conversation he had with his private secretary just weeks earlier. They had been discussing Catherine's upcoming birthday, and various suggestions had been made for appropriate gifts, jewelry from the crown collection, artwork, or perhaps a new patronage. But Charles had found himself thinking not about what would be expected, but about what would truly express his feelings for the woman who had become like a daughter to him. The brooch represented something deeper than its monetary value or historical significance. It symbolized continuity, the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next, and the recognition that Catherine had earned her place not just in the family, but in the line of remarkable women who had helped define the modern monarchy. His grandmother would have loved Catherine, Charles was certain of this. She would have appreciated her humor, her resilience, and her ability to make others feel valued and heard. Over the past few months, Charles had been gradually strengthening his relationship with both William and Catherine. The early years of his reign had been focused on establishing his authority and vision for the monarchy, but now he felt ready to deepen the personal bonds that would sustain the family through whatever challenges lay ahead. He had begun inviting them for private dinners, casual walks through the gardens at Highgrove, and quiet conversations about topics that went beyond official duties. During these interactions, Charles had discovered that Catherine possessed an intuitive understanding of what the monarchy needed to thrive in the 21st century. She could discuss policy matters with intelligence and insight, yet she never forgot that their ultimate responsibility was to serve the people with humility and genuine care. She had a gift for asking questions that revealed new perspectives, and she listened with the kind of attention that made others feel truly heard. The king also admired how Catherine balanced her public role with her private life as a mother. She was raising 3 children who would someday play significant roles in the continuation of the royal line, yet she managed to give them experiences that were both privileged and grounded. She insisted on doing school runs when possible, attending their sports events, and ensuring they understood both their responsibilities and their freedoms. Charles had often wondered whether he had been too formal with his own sons during their childhood, whether his dedication to duty had sometimes overshadowed his ability to simply be their father. Watching Catherine with her children reminded him that strength and tenderness were not opposing forces but complementary aspects of effective leadership. The decision to give her the brooch had come to him during a quiet evening at Balmoral several weeks earlier. He had been sorting through some of his grandmother's personal effects, items that held sentimental rather than official value. When he came across the velvet box containing the sapphire brooch, he had been transported back to countless memories of the Queen Mother wearing it during family celebrations, state occasions, and quiet moments of reflection. His grandmother had always believed that jewelry should tell stories, that the pieces worn by royal women should connect them to the legacy they were helping to build. She had often said that true elegance came not from the cost of what one wore, but from the meaning behind it and the grace with which it was carried. As Charles prepared for Catherine's birthday celebration, he knew that presenting her with this particular heirloom would send a powerful message, both to her and to the world. It would signal his complete acceptance of her as a full member of the royal family, his confidence in her judgment and character, and his belief that she would honor both the history and the future of the monarchy. The brooch had been cleaned and appraised, its provenance carefully documented for the royal records. But, beyond its material aspects, Charles had spent considerable time thinking about how to present it, what words would adequately express the depth of his respect and affection for the woman who had brought such positive change to their family. He had decided to give it to her privately, before the official birthday celebrations, in a setting that would allow for honest conversation and genuine emotion. The gift would not be about publicity or public perception, but about the personal bond between a father-in-law and daughter-in-law who had grown to truly understand and appreciate each other. Standing in his study that morning, holding the brooch as sunlight streamed through the windows, King Charles III felt a sense of peace about the decision he had made. Catherine's 44th birthday would mark not just another year of her life, but a new chapter in their relationship and in the story of the modern British monarchy. Catherine was reviewing correspondence in her private office at Kensington Palace when the telephone rang. The caller identification showed Clarence House, and she assumed it would be one of the king's private secretaries with details about an upcoming engagement or perhaps a scheduling matter. She had grown accustomed to the constant coordination required between the various royal households, the careful choreography that ensured the family's public duties were fulfilled without conflicts or oversights. "Good morning, Catherine." The voice was unmistakably that of King Charles himself, warm but with a hint of formality that characterized most of their direct communications. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything urgent." Catherine set aside the letters she had been reading, surprised but pleased by the personal call. "Not at all, Your Majesty. How may I help you? I was wondering if you might be able to join me for tea this afternoon at Clarence House." I have something I'd like to discuss with you privately, if your schedule permits. The request was unusual enough to capture Catherine's full attention. While they certainly met regularly for family occasions and official events, private one-on-one meetings were less common. Her mind quickly ran through possible topics, perhaps a new patronage, a change in protocol, or a family matter requiring delicate handling. Of course, I'd be happy to join you. Shall I have my office coordinate with yours regarding timing? Actually, if you could come around 4 o'clock, that would suit me perfectly. And, Catherine, please know that this is an informal conversation between family members. There's no need for your usual team to accompany you. After ending the call, Catherine found herself curious about the king's intentions. Over the years, she had developed a deep respect for Charles, recognizing the challenges he had faced during his long wait to become monarch and admiring how he had approached his new role with determination and thoughtfulness. Their relationship had evolved gradually, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to the values they both held dear. She remembered the early days of her marriage to William, when every interaction with royal family members had felt like a test she might fail. The protocols seemed endless, the expectations often unclear, and the weight of public scrutiny had sometimes felt overwhelming. But Charles had been consistently supportive, offering guidance when she needed it while respecting her need to find her own way within the family structure. One particular memory stood out from those early years. Catherine had made a minor protocol error during a state dinner, nothing serious but enough to generate some negative press coverage. She had been mortified, certain that she had disappointed everyone and proven that she wasn't suited for royal life. The next morning, Charles had called her personally to say that such incidents were inevitable learning experiences and that her genuine warmth with the visiting dignitaries had made a far greater impression than any minor breach of etiquette ever could. That conversation had marked a turning point in their relationship. Catherine realized that Charles understood the pressures she faced because he had spent decades navigating similar challenges. He had experienced the frustration of having every action scrutinized, every word analyzed, every gesture interpreted through the lens of public expectation. More importantly, he had learned that authenticity was more valuable than perfection, that people responded to sincerity even when it came packaged with occasional mistakes. As the afternoon approached, Catherine chose her outfit carefully. The king's emphasis on informality suggested something more personal than official, but she still wanted to show appropriate respect for the occasion. She selected a simple navy dress with a subtle pattern, paired with pearls that had belonged to William's grandmother, Princess Diana. The choice felt right, respectful but not overly formal, appropriate for whatever conversation awaited her. The drive to Clarence House took her through familiar London streets, past landmarks that had become part of her daily landscape over the years of royal life. She found herself thinking about how much had changed since she first entered this world, how experiences that had once seemed impossibly daunting now felt like natural parts of her routine. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but rather through countless small moments of growth and adaptation. Catherine had learned to appreciate the unique position she occupied within the royal family. As someone who had not been born into this life, she brought a different perspective to their discussions and decisions. She could remember what it felt like to be on the outside looking in, which helped her understand how the public perceived royal actions and communications. At the same time, she had gained deep appreciation for the history and traditions she had been invited to help preserve and evolve. Arriving at Clarence House, Catherine was greeted by familiar staff members who had known her for years. Their warm smiles and respectful but friendly demeanor always made her feel welcomed rather than simply tolerated. She had made it a point to learn names and remember personal details about the people who worked so hard to support the royal household, understanding that their dedication deserved recognition and appreciation. The king's private secretary escorted her to a small sitting room that Catherine had visited several times before. It was one of Charles's favorite spaces for personal conversations, decorated with artwork he had collected over the years and photographs that captured important moments in his life and reign. The room felt lived in rather than formal, with comfortable furniture arranged to encourage real conversation rather than ceremonial exchanges. Charles entered a few minutes later, having changed from his morning suit into more casual attire. He wore a well-tailored jacket with an open collar shirt, an outfit that managed to be both relaxed and refined. Catherine noticed that he seemed particularly thoughtful, as though he had been preparing for this conversation with considerable care. "Catherine, thank you for making time for this. I know your schedule has been quite demanding lately." "It's always a pleasure to spend time with you," she replied, settling into the chair he indicated. "I've been meaning to tell you how much I enjoyed our conversation after the recent garden party. Your insights about connecting with young people were particularly helpful as I plan my upcoming school visits." Charles smiled, clearly pleased that their previous discussion had been useful to her. "That's exactly the kind of collaboration I value most. We each bring different strengths and perspectives to our work, and I believe we're most effective when we can learn from each other." Tea service arrived, presented with the quiet efficiency that characterized the best royal household staff. As they settled into the comfortable rhythm of afternoon tea, Catherine noticed that Charles seemed to be building up to something significant. His conversation was more personal than usual, touching on family matters and shared interests rather than the official topics that typically dominated their interactions. "I've been reflecting quite a bit lately on how our family has evolved," Charles said, setting down his teacup. "The challenges we've faced, the growth we've experienced, and the people who have made positive differences in ways that perhaps they don't even fully realize." Catherine sensed that they were approaching the real purpose of the meeting. She listened attentively, recognizing that Charles was choosing his words with particular care. "When I consider the future of the monarchy, I think not just about policies and protocols, but about the people who will carry our values forward," he continued. "I think about character, dedication, and the ability to serve with both dignity and genuine compassion." He paused, studying Catherine's face as though gauging her reaction to his words. She remained quietly attentive, understanding that this was not a conversation requiring her input but rather one in which she needed to truly listen. "You've exceeded every expectation I might have had when William first brought you into our family," Charles said, his voice carrying unmistakable sincerity. "More than that, you've helped all of us become better at what we do. Your approach to your role has been inspiring to watch." Catherine felt a flush of warmth at his words, knowing that such direct praise was not something Charles offered lightly. Throughout her years in the royal family, she had worked hard to prove herself worthy of the position she had been given, but she had never been certain that her efforts were truly appreciated by the senior members of the family. "That means more to me than you know," she said quietly. "This family, this role, this responsibility, it's become the most important part of my life outside of my children. I've always hoped that I was contributing something meaningful." "You've contributed far more than something meaningful," Charles replied. "You've brought a perspective and an approach that has helped modernize how we connect with people while never losing sight of the traditions that give our work its foundation." The conversation continued for another hour, ranging across topics both personal and professional. Charles shared stories from his own early years in public life, offering insights that helped Catherine understand how her current challenges fit into the longer arc of royal service. He spoke about his hopes for the future of the monarchy, his pride in William's development as a future king, and his gratitude for the stability and warmth that Catherine had brought to their family dynamic. As their time together drew toward a close, Catherine sensed that Charles had something more specific to discuss. His manner shifted slightly, becoming more formal while retaining the personal warmth that had characterized their afternoon together. "Catherine, I have something for you," he said, reaching toward a small table where she noticed for the first time that a wrapped package had been placed. "Your birthday is approaching, and I wanted to give you something that expresses how I feel about your place in our family and your importance to the future we're building together." Catherine accepted the package with surprise, touched that Charles had thought to arrange a personal gift rather than simply sending something through the usual channels. The wrapping was elegant but simple, suggesting that the contents rather than the presentation were what mattered most. "Should I open it now?" she asked, uncertain about the protocol for such situations. "Please do. I'd very much like to see your reaction." As Catherine carefully removed the wrapping, she found herself looking at a jewelry box that was clearly antique, its velvet exterior worn smooth by decades of handling. The weight and craftsmanship suggested that whatever lay inside held significant value, but she sensed that the true worth of the gift lay in its meaning rather than its material components. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting warm light across the room as Catherine prepared to discover what lay hidden in the vintage box, unaware that the next few moments would fundamentally change how she understood her place within the royal family. Catherine's fingers traced the edge of the velvet box before she slowly lifted the lid. What she saw took her breath away completely. Nestled against cream silk lining lay the most exquisite sapphire brooch she had ever seen. The central stone was a deep cornflower blue, surrounded by smaller diamonds that caught the afternoon light and threw tiny rainbows across the room. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly the work of a master jeweler, with delicate platinum settings that enhanced rather than overshadowed the natural beauty of the stones. But it was more than the brooch's obvious beauty that moved Catherine to silence. Something about the piece felt familiar, though she was certain she had never seen it before. There was a timeless quality to the design, an elegance that spoke of an era when jewelry was created not just to dazzle, but to tell stories and mark significant moments in the lives of those who wore it. "Charles, this is absolutely stunning," she whispered, afraid to touch something so precious. "But I can't possibly accept something so valuable." The king's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly in his chair. "Before you make that decision, let me tell you about this particular piece. It belonged to my grandmother, the Queen Mother. It was made in 1923 as a wedding gift from King George V when she married my grandfather, then the Duke of York." Catherine's eyes widened as the historical significance of what she was holding began to sink in. This wasn't simply an expensive piece of jewelry, it was an artifact of royal history, something that had been worn by one of the most beloved members of the royal family during some of the most important moments of the 20th century. "She wore it on countless occasions over the decades," Charles continued, his voice taking on the warmth that always accompanied his memories of his grandmother. "State occasions, family celebrations, quiet moments of reflection. It was one of her favorites because it had been given with such love, and because its deep blue reminded her of the Scottish sky at Balmoral, where she spent some of her happiest hours." Catherine found herself imagining the Queen Mother wearing this very brooch, picturing the remarkable woman whose strength and grace had helped guide the monarchy through world wars, constitutional crises, and social transformations that had reshaped Britain beyond recognition. "The last time I saw her wear it was on a particularly meaningful day for our family," Charles said, pausing as though deciding how much of the story to share. "It was the morning of my wedding to Diana in 1981. She had chosen it specifically for the occasion, and when I commented on how beautiful it looked, she told me something that I've never forgotten." He stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the garden as he gathered his thoughts. Catherine remained silent, understanding that she was being trusted with memories that were deeply personal to the king. She said that true elegance came not from wearing beautiful things, but from understanding the love and hope that had been invested in them by previous generations. She believed that this brooch carried the dreams of all the women who had worn it before, and that whoever wore it next should understand that responsibility. When Charles turned back to face Catherine, she saw emotions in his eyes that she had rarely witnessed before: vulnerability, hope, and something that looked very much like fatherly love. "I believe she would have wanted you to have it," he said simply. "Not just because of your position in our family, but because of who you are as a person. You understand what it means to carry forward something precious while making it your own." Catherine felt tears beginning to form as the full weight of what was happening began to register. This was not simply a birthday gift, it was a profound statement of acceptance, trust, and confidence in her ability to honor both the past and the future of the royal family. "I'm deeply honored," she managed to say, her voice slightly unsteady. "But, Charles, are you certain about this? Something with such historical significance has exactly where it belongs," he interrupted gently. "With someone who will understand its importance and wear it with the grace it deserves. My grandmother always said that jewelry was meant to be worn, not locked away. She believed that beautiful things gained their true value through being part of real life, not through being preserved in isolation." Catherine carefully lifted the brooch from its box, surprised by how substantial it felt in her hands. The weight spoke to the quality of its construction, but also to the generations of royal history it represented. As she held it, she could almost feel the presence of the remarkable women who had worn it before her: the Queen Mother's steady strength, her unwavering dedication to duty, her ability to remain gracious and dignified even during the darkest moments of Britain's history. "There's something else you should know about this particular piece," Charles said, settling back into his chair. "My grandmother specifically mentioned it in her private papers. She wrote that she hoped it would one day be worn by someone who could bridge the gap between royal tradition and modern life, someone who understood that true service meant connecting with people as individuals rather than simply fulfilling ceremonial obligations. The description felt like a direct challenge to Catherine, a recognition of the approach she had tried to take throughout her years of royal service. She had always believed that her role was not simply to participate in ancient rituals, but to find ways to make those traditions meaningful and accessible to contemporary audiences. When she wrote those words, I think she was imagining someone very much like you, Charles continued. Someone who could honor the past while helping to shape a future that would keep the monarchy relevant and respected. Someone who could wear this brooch to a state dinner and make visiting dignitaries feel welcomed, then wear it to a children's hospital and somehow make young patients forget their pain for a few moments. Catherine found herself thinking about the responsibilities that came with accepting such a gift. It wasn't just about owning a beautiful piece of jewelry, it was about becoming a custodian of royal history, about accepting a role in the continuing story of the British monarchy. I've watched you over the years, Charles said, his tone becoming more personal. I've seen how you've approached every challenge with thoughtfulness and grace. You've never tried to change everything at once, but you've found ways to gently improve how we do things. You've modernized our approach without abandoning our core values. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. When William first brought you into our family, I'll admit I had concerns. Not about your character, that was evident from the beginning, but about whether you would be able to adapt to a life that can be quite demanding and sometimes quite lonely. I worried that the pressures might overwhelm you, that you might decide this wasn't the life you wanted after all. Catherine listened intently, fascinated to hear Charles's honest perspective on her early years as a royal family member. She had often wondered what the senior royals had really thought about her during those uncertain early days. Those concerns disappeared quite quickly, he continued with a smile. You found your own way of doing things, your own voice within our family structure. More importantly, you found ways to make all of us better at what we do. William is a more confident and effective prince because of your influence. The monarchy is more connected to ordinary people because of your approach. And, personally, I feel that I have gained not just a daughter-in-law, but someone whose judgment and perspective I genuinely value. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door, and Charles's private secretary entered with a discreet inquiry about his evening schedule. The king confirmed his arrangements and asked for a few more minutes of privacy, but the interruption served to remind both Catherine and Charles that their time together was drawing to a close. There's one more thing I want you to know about accepting this gift, Charles said once they were alone again. It comes with no expectations beyond those you already carry so well. You don't need to change anything about how you approach your role. You don't need to try to become someone different. The brooch is being given to you precisely because of who you already are. Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the gift itself but for the conversation they had shared. Charles had offered her something far more valuable than even a priceless piece of jewelry. He had given her his complete confidence and acceptance, along with a deeper understanding of her place within the royal family. I will treasure this always, she said, carefully placing the brooch back in its box. Not just as a beautiful object, but as a reminder of this conversation and what it means for our relationship going forward. Charles stood and moved toward her chair, extending his hand to help her rise. Happy birthday, Catherine. I can't think of anyone who deserves this gift more, or anyone I would trust more to carry on the traditions it represents. As they embraced, Catherine felt that she was not just receiving a family heirloom, but being formally welcomed into a legacy that she would now help to shape and pass forward. The weight of that responsibility was sobering, but also deeply fulfilling. She had found her place not just in the royal family, but in the continuing story of the British monarchy itself. 3 days later, Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror at Kensington Palace, carefully fastening the sapphire brooch to the lapel of her deep blue coat. Today marked her first public appearance since receiving the extraordinary gift from King Charles, and she had chosen to wear it to the opening of a new children's wing at St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington, an event that felt particularly meaningful given the brooch's history of being worn during moments of service and compassion. As her fingers worked with the delicate clasp, Catherine reflected on how much her perspective had changed since that afternoon at Clarence House. The brooch was more than an accessory, it felt like a talisman, connecting her to the generations of royal women who had worn it while fulfilling their duties to the British people. She could sense the weight of their collective wisdom and experience, encouraging her to approach her role with even greater purpose and dedication. William entered the room as she was making final adjustments to her appearance, and his expression immediately conveyed both admiration and recognition. He had seen enough royal jewelry over the years to understand the significance of what his wife was wearing. "Is that?" he began, moving closer to examine the brooch more carefully. "Your great-grandmother's sapphire brooch," Catherine confirmed, turning to face him fully. "Your father gave it to me yesterday. I'm still processing everything it represents." William's face showed a mixture of surprise and deep emotion. He had grown up hearing stories about the Queen Mother, and he understood better than most people the importance of the royal jewelry collection not just as valuable objects, but as symbols of continuity and connection between past and present. "He must think very highly of you to part with something so precious," William said, reaching out to gently touch the brooch. "Gondon wore this to my christening, and to countless other family occasions. I remember being fascinated by how it caught the light when I was small." Catherine felt a fresh wave of responsibility wash over her. This piece of jewelry had been present at some of the most important moments in William's life, and now she was being trusted to carry it forward into the future. The thought was both humbling and inspiring. "I want to be worthy of the trust your father has placed in me," she said quietly. "Not just in giving me something so historically significant, but in what the gift represents about my role in your family and in the monarchy." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine's lady-in-waiting, who discreetly informed them that their car was ready for departure. As they made their way downstairs, Catherine noticed that several staff members glanced appreciatively at the brooch, though they were far too professional to comment directly. She suspected that news of the gift would soon spread throughout the various royal households, carrying with it the clear message about King Charles's confidence in her abilities and judgment. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital took them through central London, past the mix of historic landmarks and modern developments that characterized the city Catherine had come to love deeply. She found herself thinking about all the times the Queen Mother had made similar journeys, traveling to hospitals, schools, and community centers to offer support and encouragement to people facing various challenges. Upon their arrival at the hospital, Catherine immediately noticed the extra attention from the press photographers gathered outside. Word had somehow leaked about her new piece of jewelry, and the significance of King Charles's gift was clearly understood by royal correspondents who had covered the family for decades. She could see telephoto lenses focusing on the brooch as she stepped from the car, and she knew that by evening, images of her wearing it would be circulating around the world. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the hospital's chief pediatrician, greeted Catherine and William at the main entrance. She had worked with Catherine on several previous occasions and had developed a deep respect for the princess's genuine interest in the welfare of sick children and their families. "Your Royal Highness, we're honored to have you here for this special opening," Dr. Mitchell said, leading them toward the new wing. "The children have been talking about your visit for weeks. Many of them have prepared drawings and letters to share with you." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Catherine was struck by how the presence of the brooch seemed to affect her interactions with the people they met. Perhaps it was her own increased confidence, or perhaps others sensed the historical significance of what she was wearing, but conversations seemed deeper and more meaningful than usual. Hospital staff, patients' families, and even some of the older children seemed to respond to an added gravitas in her presence. The new children's wing was a marvel of modern medical design, with bright colors, natural light, and spaces specifically created to help young patients feel less anxious about their treatment. Catherine moved through the rooms with her characteristic blend of formal dignity and genuine warmth, stopping to speak with individual children and their families, learning about their experiences, and offering the kind of personal attention that made people feel truly seen and valued. In the oncology ward, Catherine met 8-year-old Emma Thompson, who was receiving treatment for leukemia. Emma had been fascinated by the brooch from the moment Catherine entered her room, and, after some gentle encouragement from her mother, she worked up the courage to ask about it. "It's very pretty," Emma said quietly. "Does it have a special story?" Catherine knelt beside Emma's bed, positioning herself at the child's eye level. "It does have a very special story. It belonged to my husband's great-grandmother, who was a very kind lady. She wore it when she visited children in hospitals, just like I'm doing today. She believed that beautiful things should be shared with people who could appreciate them." Emma's eyes widened with interest. "Did she really visit hospitals like you do?" "She did, for many, many years. She thought it was one of the most important things she could do, spending time with brave children like you and learning about their lives." Catherine paused, then made a decision that surprised even herself. "Would you like to hold it for a moment?" Very carefully. With Emma's mother's permission and the supervision of the nursing staff, Catherine carefully unpinned the brooch and placed it gently in Emma's small hands. The child examined it with the intense concentration that only children can bring to something that has captured their complete attention. "It's heavier than I thought it would be," Emma observed. "And the blue is like the sky outside my window at home." "The lady who used to wear it said the same thing," Catherine replied, touched by the child's observation. "She said it reminded her of beautiful skies and happy days ahead." The moment was captured by the official photographer accompanying Catherine's visit, and later became one of the most widely published images of her entire royal career. The photograph showed Catherine kneeling beside Emma's bed, both of them focused on the historic brooch, with expressions of wonder and connection that transcended the formal nature of the official visit. As they continued through the hospital, Catherine found herself thinking about how the Queen Mother would have handled similar situations. From the stories Charles had shared, she understood that the elder royal had possessed an extraordinary ability to connect with people from all walks of life, making each person feel that their conversation was the most important moment of her day. Dr. Mitchell later commented to her colleagues that she had never seen Catherine quite so engaged and present during a hospital visit. There seemed to be an added depth to her interactions, a sense that she was drawing on wisdom and experience beyond her own years. The brooch, she suspected, was serving as more than just an accessory. It was connecting Catherine to a legacy of service and compassion that enhanced her natural abilities. During the formal opening ceremony for the new wing, Catherine was invited to unveil a plaque commemorating the occasion. As she spoke to the gathered crowd of hospital staff, patients' families, and local officials, she made a reference to the importance of continuing traditions of care and compassion while embracing new technologies and approaches to healing. "This beautiful new facility represents the best of both worlds," she said, her hand unconsciously moving to touch the brooch. "It honors the timeless commitment to caring for children that has defined this hospital for generations, while providing state-of-the-art resources that will help young patients and their families face the future with hope and confidence." The speech was relatively brief, but those who knew Catherine well noticed a new authority in her voice, a confidence that seemed to draw from sources beyond her own experience. The brooch appeared to be serving as a visible reminder of her connection to a longer tradition of royal service, lending weight to her words and presence. As the formal proceedings concluded and Catherine prepared to leave the hospital, she was approached by several staff members who wanted to express their appreciation for her visit. One elderly volunteer, who had worked at the hospital for over 30 years, made a comment that particularly resonated. "Forgive me for saying so, Your Royal Highness, but there was something special about today's visit," the woman said quietly. "You reminded me very much of the Queen Mother when she used to come here years ago. She had that same way of making everyone feel important and valued." Catherine felt a profound sense of fulfillment at the comparison. To be mentioned in the same breath as the Queen Mother, particularly by someone who had actually known her, felt like confirmation that she was honoring the legacy represented by the brooch in exactly the way King Charles had hoped. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave Catherine time to reflect on the day's events and the remarkable way the brooch had influenced her interactions. She realized that Charles had given her more than a piece of jewelry. He had provided her with a tangible connection to the best traditions of royal service, a reminder of the standards set by previous generations, and a source of inspiration that would continue to guide her work for years to come. That evening, as she carefully returned the brooch to its special box, Catherine felt that she had taken an important step forward in her evolution as a member of the royal family. The public wearing of such a significant heirloom had been noticed and appreciated, sending a clear message about her status within the family hierarchy and her commitment to honoring the values it represented. 6 months after that transformative afternoon at Clarence House, Catherine found herself in the blue drawing room at Buckingham Palace, preparing for a state banquet honoring the President of France. She stood before an ornate gilt mirror, making final adjustments to her evening gown, a stunning midnight blue creation that had been specifically chosen to complement the sapphire brooch that had become her signature piece for the most important occasions. The brooch had been professionally cleaned and its setting slightly adjusted to ensure maximum security during formal events, but its essential character remained unchanged. If anything, regular wear had given it an added luster, as though it was responding positively to being an active part of royal life once again rather than remaining locked away in a vault. William entered the room as Catherine was fastening her diamond necklace, a piece that had been part of the crown collection for generations. Together, the jewelry created an effect that was both magnificent and harmonious, honoring tradition while reflecting Catherine's own refined taste and understanding of appropriate formal wear. "You look absolutely radiant," William said, moving to stand behind her as they both regarded their reflection in the mirror. "And I think Gongon would be delighted to see her brooch being worn so beautifully." Catherine smiled, touching the brooch gently with her fingertips. Over the months since receiving it, the piece had become more than just a treasured gift. It had evolved into a source of strength and inspiration that helped her approach challenging situations with increased confidence and grace. "I've been thinking about her quite a lot lately," Catherine admitted. "Wondering what she would make of the world today, how she would handle some of the situations we face. Wearing her brooch makes me feel connected to her wisdom and experience in ways I never expected." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine's private secretary, who informed them that the king was ready to receive them in the throne room for the pre-banquet photographs. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Catherine reflected on how much her relationship with Charles had deepened since that memorable afternoon when he had entrusted her with such a precious family heirloom. The formal photographs that evening captured Catherine at what many observers later agreed was the peak of her elegance and poise. The combination of her natural beauty, impeccable styling, and the historical significance of the jewelry she wore created images that would be studied and admired for decades to come. But, more importantly, the photographs documented a moment when Catherine had fully grown into her role as a senior member of the royal family, comfortable with both the privileges and responsibilities that came with her position. During the state banquet itself, Catherine found herself seated between the French president and a prominent British business leader who had extensive interests in Franco-British trade relations. The conversation ranged across topics from cultural exchanges between the two nations to environmental initiatives that could benefit from international cooperation. Catherine participated in the discussions with an authority and insight that impressed both men, drawing on knowledge she had accumulated through years of royal engagements while offering perspectives that were uniquely her own. At one point during the evening, the French president specifically complimented Catherine on her brooch, noting that it reminded him of a similar piece he had seen in a portrait of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, during his research on Anglo-French royal connections. Catherine was able to provide him with the brooch's history, explaining its significance within the royal collection and sharing some of the stories King Charles had told her about his grandmother's wearing of it during important state occasions. "It is clear that such pieces carry more than mere monetary value," the president observed. "They represent continuity of tradition and the passage of wisdom from one generation to the next. You wear it with the grace it deserves." The comment was later reported in diplomatic cables and press coverage of the state visit, contributing to a broader narrative about Catherine's growing influence and respect within international circles. Foreign dignitaries and their spouses had begun specifically requesting opportunities to meet with her during state visits, recognizing that she offered insights into British culture and values that were both authentic and accessible. Following the successful state banquet, Catherine received a handwritten note from King Charles expressing his pride in how she had conducted herself during such an important diplomatic occasion. He specifically mentioned her interactions with the French delegation and noted that several observers had commented on her remarkable combination of dignity and warmth. "You have grown into this role in ways that exceed even my highest expectations," he wrote. "Watching you last evening, I was reminded of the very best qualities of my grandmother, while recognizing characteristics that are uniquely your own. The brooch could not be in better hands." The note arrived on the same day that Catherine received confirmation of a new patronage that had been under discussion for several months. She was being invited to become patron of the National Gallery, a position that would allow her to support one of Britain's most important cultural institutions while drawing on her long-standing interest in art history and education. The announcement of Catherine's new patronage was met with widespread approval from both cultural leaders and the general public. Her background in art history, combined with her demonstrated ability to make complex subjects accessible to diverse audiences, made her an ideal choice for the role. More significantly, the appointment was seen as recognition of her evolution from a newcomer to the royal family into a senior working royal whose judgment and capabilities were trusted with increasingly important responsibilities. During her first official visit to the National Gallery as patron, Catherine wore the sapphire brooch paired with a sophisticated grey suit that struck exactly the right note of respect for the institution while maintaining her personal style. As she toured the galleries and met with curators, educators, and visitors, it became clear that this new role would allow her to combine several of her strongest interests and skills. In the gallery's education center, Catherine spent time with a group of teenagers from diverse backgrounds who were participating in an art appreciation program designed to make classical works more relevant to young people. Her ability to connect art historical concepts to contemporary life, combined with her genuine interest in the students' perspectives and experiences, created exactly the kind of engaging educational experience the program was designed to provide. One student, 16-year-old Marcus Johnson from South London, later told reporters that meeting Catherine had changed his entire perspective on both art and the royal family. "She didn't talk down to us or try to impress us," he said. "She just talked about the paintings like they were interesting stories, and she really listened when we shared our thoughts. She made us feel like our opinions actually mattered." The comment was typical of the feedback Catherine consistently received from young people she met during her royal engagements. Her approach to these interactions had been influenced by her own experiences as someone who had entered the royal world from outside, and she never forgot what it felt like to be uncertain about protocols and expectations. As autumn progressed, Catherine found herself increasingly called upon to represent the royal family at significant cultural and charitable events. Her growing confidence and authority were evident to everyone who worked with her, and she had developed a reputation for being both thoroughly prepared and genuinely interested in the people and causes she encountered. The sapphire brooch had become closely associated with her most important public appearances, and fashion commentators had begun referring to it as Catherine's signature piece. But, more than just a style statement, the brooch had evolved into a symbol of her complete integration into the royal family and her commitment to honoring its best traditions while making them relevant to contemporary audiences. On Christmas morning at Sandringham, Catherine joined the royal family for their traditional walk to church services. She had chosen to wear the brooch with her festive coat, understanding that the Christmas morning appearance was one of the most photographed and analyzed royal events of the year. As they walked through the Norfolk countryside, surrounded by well-wishers who had gathered to see the family, Catherine felt a profound sense of belonging and purpose. King Charles walked beside her for part of the journey, and their easy conversation and obvious mutual respect were noted by royal correspondents who had covered the family for years. The relationship between a monarch and their heir's spouse had historically been complex and sometimes strained, but Charles and Catherine had clearly developed a bond based on genuine affection and shared commitment to their constitutional roles. Later that day, as the family gathered for their private Christmas celebrations, Charles raised a toast that included specific recognition of Catherine's contributions to the family and to the monarchy during the past year. He mentioned her new patronage, her successful handling of several challenging public situations, and the grace with which she had embraced increased responsibilities. "Catherine has shown us all what it means to grow into a role while remaining true to yourself," he said, raising his glass toward her. "She honors our family's traditions while helping us adapt to the world we actually live in. We are fortunate to have her among us." The toast was deeply meaningful to Catherine, representing formal acknowledgement from the king that she had earned her place not just as William's wife, but as a valued member of the royal family in her own right. The sapphire brooch, which she wore even during the informal family gathering, served as a visible reminder of how far she had traveled from those uncertain early days when every public appearance had felt like a test she might fail. As the year drew to a close, Catherine reflected on the transformative power of King Charles's gift and the confidence it had inspired in her approach to royal duties. The brooch had become more than just a beautiful accessory, it was a tangible connection to the wisdom and experience of previous generations, a source of strength during challenging moments, and a symbol of the trust that had been placed in her to carry forward the best values of the British monarchy. The evening before New Year's Day, as Catherine carefully returned the brooch to its special case after wearing it to a private family dinner, she thought about the year ahead and the continued opportunities to serve in ways that would honor both the past and the future. King Charles had given her more than a precious family heirloom, he had provided her with a deeper understanding of her role and the inspiration to fulfill it with the grace and dedication it deserved.